was a skill gap between, building people up, getting the direction in the company right, but also not micromanaging. And so that's where Leaders Who Coach came in, and most of the managers in our company have gone through Leaders Who Coach to improve the way that we do one-to-ones and the way that we run the company. And my blind spots are still my blind spots, and so I still need to be aware of them. And I do sometimes lapse in those regards, but as long as you're aware, then you can improve. It's kind of allowed me to know when I'm not in play with those values, why it feels slightly off. If you don't stand by your values and you don't run them all the way through, and you do something that's not in keeping with those, you can feel it immediately, right? It's that gut feeling that everyone has where you're like, oh. It's really allowed me to kind of understand how I want to lead and stick to it and justify decisions that I make because they are in keeping with my values. There's kind of like a grey area where you can say, well, I'll do something against my values, but it may be, is also a valid decision. I kind of stick to the ones which are in keeping with how I want to be and how I want to lead. And people need to understand why you're doing something, because otherwise, if they ever need to make a decision and you're not there, they won't make the right one. I have a one-to-one with all of my direct reports every week. I normally do most of my planning for one-to-ones Monday evening, send out agenda points for the one-to-ones, and then kind of whip through them all back to back on the Tuesday morning. Growth planning, I know some of my direct managers use that in their teams for the growth roadmap. I more feed that into a performance review every 6 months. The people that have really stuck with me are the people who think highly of me or have thought highly of me and push me to achieve what they consider is my potential, rather than a direct do this, do that, etc. Style of management. People who could unlock that internal motivation in myself were way better at leading than this forced kind of external, you need to do this style of management. You can start seeing the trends of where they are good or where they're maybe missing stuff, and you kind of can then set goals to be, how do you think this will pan out if you keep doing this behavior, and get them to think through how they would approach management or like the risks to them behaving in a certain way, and then set them goals like, okay, in this month you're going to cut down 5 tasks that you wouldn't otherwise do, or you're going to hand off this task to someone else, so that you can push them to do the bits that they add the most value to. Identifying the problem, I think, is down to the person who's doing the coaching, and then directing the questions so that people can then identify the problem themselves and then come up with their own solution, and you kind of say, oh, shall we create an action for this? Getting people to solve the problem themselves, I agree, but then identifying the problem is sometimes quite hard to identify where you need to improve, and I think that's where the managing and leading part of Leaders Who Coach comes in. I think I'm kind of in the position where I need to hold the difficult conversations so that sometimes my managers don't need to, or I can at least help them with that. I act as more of a difficult conversation broker, I guess, in the company at the moment. I've become more comfortable in difficult conversations and difficult questions. Because I feel really in the digging phase of coaching, you need to find out what's wrong. And sometimes you need to ask, really difficult questions and then just stay quiet. Probably the most important part of Leaders Who Coach is just knowing when to be quiet. The most important skill I think I picked up. And let people talk into the space, and then you really find out what's actually going on. We were going through some tricky cultural adjustments at the time, and talking it through with other people and getting support that it was the right thing to do, and because we were making decisions, right, and we didn't really have anyone to bounce ideas off, so that was really, really helpful. As founders, you deal with the weirdest stuff, and the stuff that you just didn't even think that would ever cross your plate, and understanding that we weren't the only people dealing with that kind of thing was really useful. A lot of people don't have to deal with it unless they're in this kind of position, so having other founders, especially for us, was really helpful. I practiced coaching, and we kind of got feedback on the timing aspect. It was really hard to keep it within the time limit, and equally I was coached by some other people in the cohort, and it was good to see how that works. I'm always the cheeky person that throws in some questions to throw them off. So I was trying to ask questions to throw them off, and they were really good at it, and they kind of kept bouncing it back to me and saying, what do you think, rather than answering and trying to give advice. It was good fun, and it was good to see how you can direct conversation in the right way, in a structured way. I think the coaching practice was some of the best bits. It's really easy to see all the lectures and not really practice the content, but actually doing the coaching part was really useful. I kind of consider leaders who coach as the day-to-day running of a business. So, providing you with a way to get a feeling on how the business is working and operating. You can create this framework on one side that allows you to have conversations on another side. Like, okay, so this ticket at work wasn't done. What's blocking you? What's stopping you from being able to do that? How can I help you here? And that's kind of where the leaders who coach comes in. That's why we've extended it across most of our managers now in the company, so that they can keep an eye on how we're doing on the front line of the business. Even though it's an 8-week course or 12 weeks course, it's an introduction to the space, and so it shows you where you should be diving next in your culture. So really being on the front of it and making sure you have a good culture from the start is a really important part to set you up for the next stages. Being a leader who coaches, to me, means having an understanding that people are more than just, workers or, people that contribute to your company, etc. There's a whole landscape of challenges that each individual person may have to succeed at their work. And unless you have the coaching skills to be able to explore that landscape and unlock aspects for them, they won't be performing to their best. Being a leader who coaches means both pointing the direction of the company and adding velocity and making sure that people and teams are going in the right way, but also having the kind of breadth of experience to explore their blockers and make sure that they're able to go in that direction in the best and fastest way possible.